Hi, my name is Susan Wu. I'm the Director of Technical Marketing for Midokura. We produce MidoNet, which is the open source network virtualization. We enhance OpenStack Neutron. So we have an amazing panel. I'm going to start with Jill Jubinski. She's the technical community evangelist for Blue Box, which is now part of IBM. And she's a seasoned recruiter in addition to her normal roles for doing technical evangelism in the cloud space. So pay attention. And considers her an advocate for candidates instead of just placement, which is really, really awesome, working for the people. And she loves everything. She loves to deliver joy to others. I took this off the internet. I hope it's right. Okay, Niki. Niki has to stand up. So Niki is the OpenStack Evangelista from Cisco. She joined Cisco, by the way, in MetaCloud. This through the acquisition in 2014. Began her journey in OpenStack way back when at Rackspace, 2008. Wow, what was that? Quite a while back. But that was the beginning of internet, beginning of cloud, actually. I misspoke. And she's a frequent speaker and blogger, and she's a really recognized person in the cloud industry and an outspoken advocate for women in tech, and also participating in women in OpenStack activities.
I also love everything.
Oh no.
Especially that dessert.
Ooh. Keith Basil, he's the principal product manager for OpenStack, focused on RHEL OSP 7. And 6, or whatever.
Yeah, just the product in general.
Exactly.
And I'm one of several people on the team.
Absolutely. Product management. He actually works on the Triple O project and the Ironic. Very personal things. He likes Virginia Hare Scramble. I don't know what that is, but plays chess.
Yeah, I play chess, and I ride dirt bikes in the woods, which is hare scrambling.
Okay. To my left is Tony Campbell. He's the Director of Training and Certification for Rackspace. Started in Rackspace in 2003 and actually works on certification and training, as I mentioned before, responsible for educating Rackers and the public on OpenStack and things in general. When he's not in the cloud, he enjoys family, sports, and loves doing local theater productions.
It'll be a great show, definitely.
Imad Sousou is the Vice President and Services Group and General Manager in Intel Corporation. And it's a position he's had since 2003. He's responsible for Intel's broad efforts around OpenStack's open source software. And it's across a range of technologies and market segments, you name it. Enterprise Linux, virtualization, I guess Intel VT as well. And all that, and a data center, cloud, embedded, whole 9 yards, and even client Linux. He sits on the board of directors for the OpenStack Foundation and is on the advisory board for the Core Infrastructure Initiative at the Linux Foundation. Lisa Marie Namphy. She's the OpenStack Solutions Marketing leader at HP Cloud, one of HP's thought leaders and evangelists around OpenStack and open source. Currently responsible for HP Helion and OpenStack Solutions Marketing. Prior to HP, Lisa was responsible for marketing initiatives in HP Cloud OS and HP Cloud Service Automation. And prior to HP, she was in BI, BPM, Business Performance Management, Ops, Operational Intelligence, things like Oracle, Hyperion, Vitria, and Adaptive Planning. So with that, we're going to start. And so...
actually more relevant to this audience, I also run the community user groups in the SF Bay area with my colleague Sean Roberts, who spoke earlier, and just published my second book on OpenStack. Yay!
Okay. So we're honored here to talk about diversity. And so there's been something trending on Twitter that says, I look like an engineer. So just to start, by inspection is not a good way of defining diversity, right? So let's start with that. So how would the panelists define diversity? And then you can answer it in the way of diversity in the OpenStack kind of context or your own work in the context of your own workplace. We'll start with anybody.
So I kind of see diversity in the context of OpenStack is kind of, there's two different aspects. One is cultural diversity. So obviously OpenStack is all around the globe, and there's a number of people from countries far and wide that are participating in OpenStack. The primary language in OpenStack, of course, is English, which could make it challenging for certain countries and people in certain countries to participate. The other diversity aspect is, in addition to like geographic or cultural, is gender diversity. And that's another sort of hot topic that OpenStack has been tackling by way of the Women of OpenStack group.
Yep, absolutely. Another perspective?
We noticed when we started the Women of OpenStack Scholarship Program that is now in its second rev this time around, that of all the applications we got, of course they weren't all women that we got, but we only allowed women to apply. There was not very much diversity within that subgroup. Almost everybody that applied was from China or India. And so I think other areas are doing better in terms of women's participation in OpenStack and in open source. We didn't look at, we didn't do interviews by voice, so we chose people from US colleges, but they also turned out to be native from China mostly, and from India. And it was like 98% of the applications that we got. So I think one of the things we like to look at is how within these subgroups we can still remember that diversity goes a lot further than just gender.
Yeah, and I know OpenStack Foundation's doing a fair amount just on this topic, Imad.
Yeah, and actually let me speak to that, because we spent quite some time in the OpenStack Foundation when we discussed creating the OpenStack Diversity Working Group in terms of defining the aspects of diversity that we would like to see, and it is fairly broad. Obviously, it is around gender, sexual orientation, national origin, and so on. And there is quite a long list of how we define diversity, and this is out of the belief, not just from the foundation, but from the foundation, from the companies who are participating, and from a lot of the folks who are around the OpenStack community, in that we would like to see the OpenStack community, basically the developer community and so on, be representative of both from a user perspective and from society. And we can talk about like why is that important, but the thing that I can tell you, the highlight I can tell you on is the importance of that is that it is really critical to be able to achieve some of these diversity goals where you are representative of society that's around you, from not just from a social perspective, but from a organizational health perspective, but also as well as from a what I would call quote unquote a business perspective, and bringing all of these views into the project. So I think the OpenStack Foundation have done a very good job at defining this. And I think it would be good to actually go through that and get people lined up in terms of supporting that definition and that.
Absolutely, we could take that maybe a little drill down on that a little bit. But I think while we're sort of thinking about this, I'd like to hear about sort of the individual perspectives of diversity in the workplace. Maybe hear from Tony and Keith as well.
Yeah. So for me, diversity to me, if I have to sum it up, it's differences for me. People who are different, all coming together, and there's so much power and comfort in that. So when I started going to OpenStack summits way back in the day, I would walk around the halls, and one of the things I think about, wow, there's a lot of great, very smart people here, but I'm always looking for someone who looks like me. And it was rare to run across somebody who looks like me. And I was like, oh wow, there's someone else who looks like me. But as we've grown, there's more and more people, I think, who look like me. And I think everybody kind of has that for themselves. They want somebody they can connect with, someone that makes them feel like they belong. So I think OpenStack is doing a great job of even bringing this topic up. The fact that we have this panel, the fact that we have different groups back at our corporations that help us drive towards this. I think we're ahead of the game, and we have an opportunity to really lead here in diversity. So I'm just pumped about the fact that we're even sitting here.
It sounds like the foundation and community have done a lot, and so maybe talk about the benefits of this, maybe tangible or soft benefits of having this kind of diversity in the community as well as in the workplace. Keith?
Yes, that's true. Niki just whispered to me that diversity is. It makes companies and organizations more innovative, and in fact, that was kind of my answer. Because I work at Red Hat, and Red Hat is a global company. And before Red Hat, all of my employment has been largely U.S. companies, even though Red Hat is a U.S. company. The other companies were not so much a multinational, is really the point. And before Red Hat, I had a very American-centric view on culture and diversity. And even as a black man in America, working at Red Hat has given me the opportunity to see different perspectives on the U.S. as well as different perspectives in technology. So, for example, I spoke at Tokyo. Spoke in Japan at the Tokyo, Japan. Sorry, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Japan. It's all a blur. But there was a Red Hat summit, and being exposed to the Japanese culture was very interesting to see the views and the perspectives. Going to Brno, Czech Republic, talking to our guys there has been very interesting. Coming back from Ireland just 2 weeks ago, very interesting perspective. So what I've learned, in fact, on our team, one day I was talking to a guy, and we realized that there were only 2 Americans on a team of like 10 of us, right? Which was kind of amazing because we've got a lot of guys from France. And I like that because on a global scale, the way you rise up, it's what Mark McLaughlin and I were talking about in Ireland. It's a duocracy, right? So what you do kind of rises you up, and Red Hat's internal culture reflects that. So once you build your values on something like a duocracy, the talent rises to the top, and you get that diversity based on talent versus some arbitrary filter that will prevent somebody from getting to that goal.
It sounds like that it is sort of the doer's attitude. But then actually what's happening, though, is there's sort of cultural barriers, though, even working with within the community. Like in companies like ours, we have a few Japanese engineers. They don't tend to speak up. Of course, their code is awesome. And this can be parallel in other countries or whatever. They don't speak up. So what would you guys say? I'll just
reply to that and then let somebody else jump in. So in Ireland, over, pint of Guinness, Mark and I were talking about just that, where you have folks, let's say, from an Asian background who are very strong technically, brilliant, but that cultural barrier prevents them from being super active in the community. And I think we should find a way to tap into that.
Yeah. Are there things that the foundation's doing or the companies are doing to encourage that kind of moving up and moving forward mentality?
I don't have the answer to that. But what I was going to say is a lot of the things that you're speaking of are the same issues that we deal with here in the U.S. as women. So the same problems of these are really smart individuals, but they're just not willing to step forward and show the talent that they have. So we need to be able to somehow break down the barriers, no matter what, whether it's from a gender perspective, from a race, cultural background perspective, so that all of these people can float to the top, like you said.
I think too often the onus is put on us to break down these barriers. It really has to come from everyone else. I think it needs to come from the top down. There has to be trainings that are required and mandatory to try to get people to understand that they got to put their belief systems in check. I can't even tell. So I just finished this book for the second time, and the first time that I wrote it with Jacek, actually from Rackspace. He did a lot of writing there, technical writing. And I actually wrote most of it, but I put both our names on the cover because I thought it would be good to have a non-HP name on there, look a little bit more objective, and because I wanted it to be about OpenStack. And I cannot tell you how many people didn't believe that I wrote a word of that book because there was some guy's name on the cover. And my colleagues, that some of them are here in the room, have had to get in arguments with people and defend me and say, no, she did write that book. And I think they heard that even more than people had the guts to come and tell me. So that just tells me that, a lot of this attitude is so prevalent. I can't break through that barrier if I don't even have access to it, because people aren't having those conversations with me. So I think you really need to do in corporations, and some are doing it and are better than others, corporate-wide I'm not going to say sensitivity training because it's ridiculous, but just having people understand that what I think either Keith or Niki said earlier, you want to hire the best person for the job, but it turns out that you might not recognize that that is the best person for the job. When I saw Tony present in Portland at the OpenStack Summit, it was the best presentation at the OpenStack Summit. Anyone else who was in that room, he nailed it. I walked up to him afterwards, I shook his hand, I said, I need to know who you are because you're amazing. And, but I wonder how long it took him to even get that opportunity to be able to show everybody that he was the best at that. Because we don't take the time when we're doing our interviews and when we're promoting people and we're thinking about, maybe there's a few other people we need to talk to make sure that we really are hiring the best and promoting the best.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Lisa, by the way. It does start from the top, and you really have to start with understanding the numbers and understanding the metrics, and then set the right targets. And from a lot of companies, Intel included, one of the things that we've started doing is actually reporting on diversity. Clearly when you look at whether from the US-centric or global-centric, that you have the available talent on any specific segments, whether it's technical females or Hispanics or in the US native Indians, you can clearly see that, hey, engineers, this many electrical engineers, total available market is 27% are females. And when you look at a group and you find that 100% of it is male engineers, you immediately know that you have excluded 30% out of the talent. So you're actually getting less talent because you have not incorporated, because of a lot of reasons, by the way. There are some of them are just internal biases, some of them is just cultural. There's just a lot of reasons for that. And unless you have the metrics and unless you are able to set goals, you can and report on those goals, then you really will not move the needle all that much. Now, translating, it's much easier to do that in a company. We do that at Intel. We publish results just like we publish financials. We publish, results on diversity with like clear goals. Committed to the industry. Hey, Intel will hire minimum 40% diverse candidates, blah, blah, and all of those type of numbers. It's a little bit trickier and to apply that to an open source project, which, by the way, sorry, but I do disagree with you that we're doing good. I don't think we're doing good. And this is not an OpenStack comment. I think open source in general, when you look at open source projects in general, we're actually not very hospitable to cultural diversity or to gender diversity or to diversity from different national origins and so on. And the reason for that is that we tend to be a very harsh culture that is so centric around what is what a lot of people would define as like, hey, it's okay, live with it. This is an open source culture, and it's really not. It's really not. And there's a lot of things that you can do, tops down, enforced, and you've seen some of that. The Linux Foundation did some wonderful work there. Linus himself have taken a lot of steps that way in the right direction to help in these areas. And I think we just need to do this, get the numbers and get the tops down.
Agreed. Yeah, the metrics are very important, and I think there's some things around communication that's very different between non-Western and Western cultures. I think it's a good way to actually segue into maybe what are those challenges, right? It seems like a lot of organizations do know that they're falling behind. They're not doing as well as they would like. Companies and open source projects alike. So what are some of those challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is that anytime you're talking about diversity, be it gender or geographic or cultural, is that it always seems to be an issue of someone feeling like a victim. And as a woman, I don't want to be in a role because somebody has a quota to have more women on the team. I also don't want to be, sitting on panels, and this has happened in OpenStack, where women are grabbing the mic talking about how they're victimized by men when all the men in the room are actually there because they want to try to promote the issue. And so what we end up doing is we say, we want OpenStack to be friendly to women. So we organize all these things for women, which is great because, okay, cool, there's someone like me, gender-wise. But you end up taking those women and you send them on a boat cruise by themselves and you give them their own breakfast. And so, yeah, okay, I feel like there's people like me, that's great, but you're not actually doing anything to solve the problem. Anytime someone's coming from a point of view of feeling like a victim, there's a winner and a loser. And if you have a winner and a loser, you're not going to solve any problems.
Tony, do you have a perspective?
Can I disagree?
I know you got to.
Clapped,
You got to. Clearly, two sides of the coin, right?
Look, I think from the feedback I hear from a lot of our women engineers and technical leaders, things like going on a ship tour in the Vancouver Bay was a wonderful opportunity for these women to share experiences and figure out, hey, we can do this way. It would help to do things that way.
But share experiences on what? On sharing experiences about how they also feel victimized? Like, what does that solve?
There was no one was there. All the women who were there were very, very accomplished women that they did not need to prove or disprove anything. I've known a lot of them, whether from IBM, whether from Intel or HP. Some of those women who were at the event that you described as recreational. It was not recreational. It was very, very effective, I thought. And from the feedback I've heard and from some of the actions of like, hey, let's go do this and this and that, that was actually a wonderful thing to do. So I don't think we should, having, the women of OpenStack deciding that, hey, we're going to go on a ship tour or we're going to go hang out at a bar and discussing us women or us, Hispanics. I think that's perfectly okay. And that's a wonderful thing, and they should do this. But I think, how we as a community come together and as a foundation in OpenStack come together to actually help those things with using metrics, with, with using not necessarily quotas. But if 40% of computer science graduates are women, okay? There is no reason why 98% of the patches submitted to OpenStack should be done by men. There is something wrong with this picture. And this is not about quota, it's about, hey, are we reflecting the society in terms of the talent pool that exists in computer science and that is not being contributed? And that's really the point.
I think one of the main things that we need to focus on, whether quotas aside, all of that stuff, is that we're creating a culture where anyone can come into our organization and feel empowered and trusted and are able to do their job. And we have a lot of companies, I'm sure we've all worked at some where this does not exist, and it is literally impossible to just do your work. And so that creates incredible barriers for people to want to stay and want to grow and want to stay in tech. So I think that for me, that's what we need to be focusing most on, to make sure that we're creating an environment where everyone feels like they can do.
Yeah, so I, for one, missed the boat cruise while I was working for my slides on my talk. So, but anyway, segue. So perfect timing to talk about solutions, though, because actually we've already structured the problem, and it seems like everybody's doing the right thing. There's some event organizers that's reaching out, giving some spots for women speakers. There's got to be a lot more things we can do, and so we got people in the room. Please shout out. We actually could use some real solutions.
So I'll give one example of a possible solution. This is what I do personally. So as a black man in America, there's this survival thing that we have to adhere to at all times. So for example, this is real. So at the Atlanta Summit, I had a friend in Atlanta, and we were riding around in his GTR, and he let me drive it, wonderful car, and he says, Basil, if you get pulled over, roll all the windows down, turn the car off, roll all the windows down, put the keys on the roof, and stick your hands out the window. Okay?
That is no lie. I've had the same experience.
That's like the rule for surviving as a black man in Atlanta, okay? So we have this baggage that we carry for that, in addition to trying to be good at tech, right? So I play a lot of chess, and then one day I was playing with a bunch of guys, and I just paused, And I realized that everybody that I was playing chess with, and these are brilliant guys, they'd all been locked up before. And I'm like, there's something wrong with this picture where you have guys with this aptitude, this intelligence, and they've all been through the jail system, okay? So I said, okay, we got to fix this. So what I've been doing is I've been teaching kids how to play chess, right? You know, to get them to think of, you know, you make a move, here are the consequences, you know, strategic thinking, mathematical, you know, spatial stuff, all of that. And that's been very helpful. And to me, I just got to get, you know, 5 people to go to college from like 10 years old, learn tech, be smart, and go to college, and that's a win for me. So I've been doing that kind of on a yearly basis to teach people and to get them and help them survive and get to a point where they can go to college, get a CS degree, and then be in this space. Because the best thing about technology is that it's a true duocracy, right? And what I fell into as a kid, I was a member of the Computer Underground, I'll admit it. But the beautiful thing about the hacker underculture is that behind a 2400 baud modem, nobody knew you were black. Okay? It was awesome because I was then judged on my skill and my exploits and what the knowledge that I could share with other people in the community. And I rose. I created a small name for myself, and I still have friends to this day from many, many years ago that came from that culture. So taking that to a more commercial sense, if I can get, you know, a handful of kids to come out of college with a CS degree and instill in them that duocracy mentality, they can survive on their own.
Another solution out there? Very good point, actually.
I think helping women just to learn how to be confident and speak up. You know, a lot of times it's like, you know, there seems to be blame on men for not looking at women as ideal candidates, and maybe that's true to an extent, but I also think there's an earnest on women to speak up. Like, if you want to be heard, you have to speak up, and you may have to speak louder than you're comfortable with to be heard, but if you want to be heard, you have to do that, and that doesn't come natural for a lot of women. So I think helping women just be more confident and feel confident in speaking up and kind of spreading that kind of awareness that the earnest is partially on you as well.
So it's a good point, actually, to take questions. There's a question out in the back.
Well, yeah, not really a question, just my idea of solutions. So when I was growing up, I went to the computer at A-level, and then I went to university. I didn't see any girls in the computer class at A-level. I saw 3 or 4 at university. Now, I'm assuming that ratio is changing. Obviously, I'd love to go back to uni, but I've never been allowed to. And I think, you know, when I look at it at a company perspective, because when I worked in England, we never discussed quotas and stuff like that in the same manner as it's discussed over here. You know, it's a lot more obvious because the company talks about it over here about making sure you've got broad bits and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering whether, because I don't see a bias in IT, like you said, when you're on the internet, no one sees you for anyone else. You know, you're just one of everyone else. And I see that during interviews. You literally, it doesn't matter where the person's come from, it doesn't matter whether they're male or female. When you're talking tech, you're talking tech. And you get that same passion. And as long as you find that click with what you're after, that's the right person for you. I'm just wondering whether maybe this problem is also going to solve itself slowly through the school system. You know, if my kids were more involved in computing at school, that would slowly ripple up, and then that would slowly make maybe more vocal as well about moving into that industry. That's my thought. Maybe it's something that's going to take a long time to fix because we've got to fix it at the kind of junior school level.
Yeah, that makes sense. And globally, it is a problem because some women are not able to work outside the house after they've been married. So even I've hired engineers that were from Egypt, and they are a full-fledged engineer. After marriage, they completely can't work. So they end up working on things like, you know, on Odesk or something like that. So there are some barriers. But I'm glad to hear that it's open. So I've been given the 2-minute queue. Are there any more questions out there? We can take 2 more.
I have one more statement to make real quick.
Okay.
So I do think that it is something that, like, if we just let it ride out over the years, it will eventually fix itself. I'd rather not wait so many years for it to happen. And just to be like a little bit curt, because that's who I am, I think that one thing that will fix a lot is just that people stop putting up with bullshit. And there's a lot of bullshit that we're put through and people need to speak up and not let that happen. And a lot of people are afraid to speak up about things that they go through and call people out because it's hard. But these, things won't fix themselves without people being confident and speaking up.
Lisa.
Just pay me the same, and if you don't, just know I'm going to negotiate.
Let's get a perspective
Yeah, you
over
don't
here.
want to mess with her. But I actually don't think things will fix themselves, even eventually. I think we need to get very proactive about it. And I think it's, as we mentioned at the beginning, it's not just gender. Diversity is a lot of things, and in this country, we see the numbers. We know the misrepresentation of certain cultures, in particularly African American cultures, in sciences and tech and math. And you've got Tony and Keith and me, and if we bring Des and Bear up here, I think you've got like the 5 people in OpenStack. And we can't just keep switching companies. I think one of the because it's not just. So we need to build the funnel. And I think in terms of solutions, that's one of the reasons the Women of OpenStack project was looking at colleges to get more women in the funnel, get more African American students into colleges in math and tech fields. So when you guys go into your communities and you go and you work with the youth, bring the math and science into the African American communities. Make sure, which is even less number representation than women, and make sure to help build the funnel so we have a great pool to interview from.
Great point. Last thing is, I think we need human supporters of each other. Seriously, when I first spoke at executive briefing, my VP was text his other friend that says, "Oh my God, I'm very nervous. I've never heard her speak before." But meanwhile, my senior director is the one who pushed me up towards speaking. So be the human supporter, male or female. It's just be the supporter. Let people try.
I think time's up, but we want to give a shout out to Egla Stigler for proposing the diversity panel. So I know you're not here, but if you're watching, thank you.
And thank you, Sharam. Thank you, everybody.